At this point, let us welcome Dr. Santiago to introduce our next speaker.
Our next speaker, it's one of the more renowned veterinarians. He's currently the area veterinary consultant of PIC Philippines. He's a fellow of the Philippine College of Swine Practitioners. He was an assistant professor, College of Veterinary Medicine, University of the Philippines at Los Baños. University of the Philippines since 1975 to 1988. He is an awardee of the Presidential Service Merit Award from the Philippine College of Swine Practitioners 2021. He was and he is still an outstanding veterinarian in farm animal practice from the Philippine Veterinary Medical Association. Let us welcome Dr. Maximino M. Montenegro with the topic of protecting the gains of BABay ASF by establishing Biosecure Swine Compartments.
Good day, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me today for this presentation on protecting the gains of BABay ASF by establishing Biosecure Swine Compartments. ASF was introduced in August of 2019 and has spread throughout Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Today, ASF runs the risk of being endemic in the Philippines in the short and medium term until a safe and effective vaccine becomes available that can differentiate between the wild and the vaccine virus. Unless the situation is remedied, the Philippines may become a pork import dependent country at the expense of the local swine industry. In fact, we now import almost every agricultural product available in the world market. This includes galunggong, which may have been caught in our own West Philippine Sea. So the only way forward is to revive the swine industry in the face of ASF challenge is to establish biosecure swine compartments, where appropriate, to safeguard the gains of the BABay ASF program. Now, there are two OIE sanctioned animal disease management strategies that can be implemented where disease eradication is not feasible. They are the establishment of disease-free zones or disease-free compartments. Now, let us take a look at these two strategies, starting with establishment of disease-free zones. Now, countries have separated segments of their animal population on the basis of geography. Now, these separations would be caused by rivers, desert, mountains, or in other cases, political boundaries between provinces or states. Now, the safety of these zones has been guaranteed by strict animal movement control and intense disease surveillance. Now, for example, we import carabit from India where FMD is present. To be able to implement properly these zones, an efficient and credible veterinary service with an adequate surveillance system remains the essential element in the establishment and maintenance of the health conditions of the animals. However, there are certain diseases or situations where zoning alone is not sufficient to guarantee freedom of disease in certain animal subpopulation. For example, when disease is present in wildlife, like rabies, or where the disease is carried by migratory birds, zoning does not always prove to be sufficient to guarantee the status of the subpopulation. For example, here in the Philippines, now avian influenza outbreaks are recorded in areas where migratory birds often congregate. In certain situations, it is only through strict biosecurity measures that disease freedom in specific subpopulations had been preserved. For example, despite the fact that vaccines were not extensively used, eradication programs for bovine brucellosis and bovine tuberculosis had been successful, but relied heavily on the use of biosecurity measures for the separation of herds. The OIE has further elaborated this biosecurity approach into what is today known as the concept of compartmentalization, which, with its principles and guidelines, had been incorporated into the Code of Terrestrial Animals. Take note that the key words for compartmentalization are separation of animal subpopulations and strict implementation of biosecurity. This ensures business continuity by protecting the supply value chain. From the preceding discussion, we have established that compartments as defined by the OIE are animal subpopulations presenting different health statuses that can be separated from each other through strict biosecurity measure. We have also stated that compartmentalization is an internationally accepted business management strategy where zoning alone is not sufficient to guarantee the freedom of disease in certain animal subpopulations. Now, locally, we have proposed to adopt the South African model of a compartment. As defined, a compartment is a swine subpopulation contained in one farm, with a strictly supervised biosecurity management system where surveillance, enhanced biosecurity, and movement monitoring are applied for the purpose of maintaining freedom from ASF and continuation of trade and business. So the question you might ask is, why adopt the South African model? Well, because they have several distinct advantages. Firstly, each farm or farm cluster will be considered a single compartment. Secondly, the compartments are organized into farmer cooperative associations, like for example Unibat in Batangas. The FCA will be responsible for strictly implementing the biosecurity plan of the compartments. So there is a responsible private agency that will guide the farmers. Thirdly, compartments can operate in threat zones or even in quarantine areas for as long as they remain ASF negative. If a farm compartment breaks down with ASF, only that farm will be subject to quarantine or depopulated as warranted. That is for as long as they are supervised or supported by the responsible government veterinary services or agency like the Bureau of Animal Industry, the provincial veterinarian, city veterinarian, or the municipal agriculture office in their locality. Earlier, we mentioned about a biosecurity plan that will be strictly implemented by the farmer cooperative or association under the supervision of the responsible government veterinary service. The biosecurity plan for each farm compartment and related functional units like the feed supplier, the genetic sources, and slaughterhouses shall be designed in consultation with stakeholders and implemented and monitored by the Swine Farm Association or FCA to maintain freedom from ASF. Now, the health assurance team of the FCA, it will be primarily responsible for implementing and ensuring compliance with the biosecurity standard operating procedures as embodied in the biosecurity plan. Now, the components of the farm biosecurity plan will be firstly, farm identification, location, and registration of PIN code or QR code. This is to facilitate traceability of the product or the pigs. Secondly, to protect the herd, there would be the enhanced farm biosecurity SOPs that should be conformed not only by the veterinary service but of the individual farmers who are or compartments who compose the FCA. Surveillance, strict surveillance and monitoring will be part of the program to protect the herd. Movement control or monitoring of people, supplies, pigs, incoming genetics, finishers to slaughters, viajeros, etc. shall also be recorded and complied with. Now, there will be a close coordination and communication between compartments, governments, and stakeholders. And lastly, functional units like the feed mill suppliers and abattoir or slaughterhouses should comply also with the biosecurity standards that will be imposed by the FCAs. Now, the province of Batangas and the Batangas Port Council, who are vanguards in the fight against ASF, will pilot the Biosecure Swine Compartments patterned after the South African model. Initially, swine farms in areas free of ASF within their jurisdiction will be repopulated with the aim of ensuring business continuity and making available branded Batangas Port. The swine compartments will be at the same time attempt the elimination of other swine diseases that are barriers to international trade, such as classical swine fever and Reston Ebola. When BABay ASF was launched, it was emphasized that only a high degree of participation and commitment from farmers, LGUs including the barangays, and government-private sector partnership will ensure the success of efforts geared towards control of ASF. Now, this participation and support has proven to be important in the success of control of ASF in the province of Batangas, to cite an example. Now, the same degree of participation and cooperation will be required of swine farm organizations who will pursue compartmentalization. Maraming salamat po sa inyong pakikinig, at kung meron po kayong mga katanungan, ay malugod ko pong sasagutin sa abot ng aking makakaya. Magandang araw po muli sa inyong lahat.
To accommodate your questions regarding our last talk, here are Dr. Santiago and Dr. Montenegro for our second Q&A of the evening.
Good evening, Doc Max. Thank you for the presentations. Short, brief, and concise. That's the best way to describe your presentation. Doc Max, I would like to ask if, in your perspective or in your point of view, what are the barriers that you see that we need to address or at least overcome in order for the pilot project of compartmentalization succeed, or at least show a promise or a sign of success? What are the barriers do you see, Doc?
Thank you for your question, Dr. Santiago. Actually, first barrier I would say would be the if there would be no cooperation between the local government unit and the farmers. The farmers should not be afraid, no? Kasi usually they're afraid pag nakikialam na yung yung gobyerno, because they always think in terms of regulation and the population. But actually, the government now is very supportive of the repopulation efforts. So importante is there should be also government-private partnership. We have found that to be effective for BABay ASF. But in terms of compartmentalization, we cannot expect the government to be there all the while, no? So we have to rely on ourselves kasi mahirap yung surveillance and monitoring. So if we work together as an association, yung Farmers Cooperative and Association, and what do you call this? Establish health assurance teams, no, as an organization, so that they would be the one to execute the biosecurity plan. Kasi kung kanya-kanya lang, each farmer executing its own biosecurity, talking about a large mga backyard farms, no? Kasi sabi ni Dr. Hong earlier, backyard farms mahirap, which is true. But if there will be an organization that will be overseeing these clusters of backyard farms, we put it that way, you need an organization to monitor yung surveillance. So yun ang una natin dapat na overcome, no? So we need to work together, trust the government, we need their support.
So,
thank you.
Yeah, Doc Max is you're saying that ASF is now evolving into a social disease. For us to control it, we should also consider the social interaction of the stakeholders, not just the pigs per se. There's this question from Dr. Giselle Guzman. You mentioned earlier that the purpose of compartmentalization is you need to protect the value chain. So the question of Dr. Guzman is, apart from biosecurity monitoring, what other surveillance strategies can be implemented?
Biosecurity, biosecurity and surveillance.
Yes.
Uh,
What other strategies can be implemented?
yeah, nag-e-echo kasi.
I'm sorry.
So, yeah. So biosecurity and surveillance is a big part of biosecurity. No? Sabi nga kanina ni Dr. Hong, I would refer to his presentation. Uh, Kailangan unahan mo yung ano. So if you have only 5%, if you have more than 5% na infection rate, okay, prevalence, then it's always possible that you would be too late. In my experience, if you detect abortion in a herd, no, you might be actually 1 week or 2 weeks late. Okay, because there is always possibility that it has spread to other areas. So you will have to test the whole population. And that's expensive, di ba? But if we have a cluster of small farms, ang gagawin mo lang doon, implementing biosecurity or compartmentalization, you would just depopulate yung isang farm na yon, and then you could be the rest of the compartment, no? Compartment with the cluster of farms can continue with the populate with the business. So biosecurity surveillance is a very big part of biosecurity. You cannot implement biosecurity without doing any surveillance work.
Doc Max.
Answer the question of Dr. Giselle.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Max. Dr. Max, when we developed the concept, was there a buy-ins from all the stakeholders identified in biosecurity plan? I mean, were there buy-ins from Dr. Rubina Crescencio?
Thank you for your question, Dr. Crescencio. Actually, I made that as a proposal uh, to the Bureau of Animal Industry and to the Batangas Pork Council. No? So there is no national buy-in yet except for the BAI, but it has not. But we will pilot, just like BABay's ASF. We will pilot it again in Batangas. But other areas who would like to try compartmentalization is welcome to join. Kasi this would even be more effective in areas that are free from ASF. Kasi pagka meron ng ASF, it's too late. It's too difficult to control. Diba? But the beauty of compartmentalization is that even if you are in a red zone, you can still put up compartments because that is exactly the definition. You're separating a subpopulation that are free from ASF from the bigger population that could be infected by ASF. No? And this is a good time. But what is the reality? The reality is, ubus na yung mga baboy. So it is very easy now to put up a subpopulation, a compartment that is composed of a subpopulation of pigs that are free from ASF. Wala kang nakapit-bahay eh, ubus na yung baboy eh. So this is the best time to set it up. And because there will be a learning curve, right? And the best way is if you make mistakes, it's better to make the mistakes now rather than to make the mistakes later when there are more pigs around the area. I hope I answer the question of Dr. Crescencio. Doc Amil, she has a follow-up question. Says, I mean, were there buy-ins? Yes.
Yes.
Batangas has agreed to pilot the project. No? There will be two levels. One will be the commercial farms composed of members of the Unibat group, and there will also be backyard farms that will be recipients of the Inspire program, and these will be clustered farms. Sa Batangas lang po yung buy-in so far. That's the honest truth about it.
Well, the beauty of it is that our industry is taking baby steps. It's better than that is expected every time we fall down. So the idea here is this is the step that we could say we could take to the road of recovery. Okay, there's this question by Dr. Alice Bungay. Hi, Doc Max. My question is compartmentalization offers an attractive alternative to zoning as an option for swine producers to ensure business continuity and sustain trade in the face of ASF. Can you comment it? As I understand, Dr. Bungay, the question is, can we replace the zoning guideline with the proposed compartmentalization proposal that you just presented?
Thank you for your question, Dr. Alice. I think I am not sure if we would be able to uh, implement zoning in, in the Philippines in terms of ASF because of, well, one is government policy, na, well, we have not accepted yet segmental or tooth extraction. So, for example, if you have a province like Bulacan, which is a red zone, how do we establish a zone, a geographical area that would be considered free of ASF when alam naman natin na there's too much movement, di ba? Region 3 is the biggest swine producing area in the Philippines. But if you consider these provinces that composes Region 3, it would be very difficult to uh, to establish a zone that is free from ASF. And compare this, for example, to Bukidnon, okay, wherein from the very start they already have a tradition of biosecurity. If you recall, moving from Cagayan de Oro going to Bukidnon, there is a semblance already of disinfection where passengers would be asked to alight from their truck, pass through a foot bath, and yung ganon, di ba? And if you're coming from the Davao area, there is a place there at the boundary between Davao and Bukidnon where the same procedure is implemented. So zoning can be in areas, for example, Bukidnon could be an ASF free zone. In fact, we have recommended that we can make Bukidnon as hog cholera or classical swine fever free zone. No, so for export purposes, no, we're thinking about that. But so maybe in some areas we can establish zones, ASF-free zones like in Bukidnon. But here in Luzon, it would be very difficult, in my opinion, to set up an ASF-free zone. But it would be easier to come out with a compartment within a red zone. This would be composed of clusters of small farms or even clusters of commercial farms. Diba? I would be thinking along those lines because then there would be business continuity and they would be able to implement the proper biosecurity procedures. In fact, the National Federation of Swine Raisers is actually launching their own uh, repopulation program. And I think that compartmentalization would be very much suited in this program that they are thinking of. They will start in the province of Bulacan, to the best of my knowledge. No? I don't know if there will be other provinces that will be joining. I hope I answered your question, Dr. Alice.
Thank you, Dr. Max. Another question here, coming from Dr. Mark Anthony C. Mercado. Regarding tooth extraction and related to compartmentalization, it is highly possible that some ASF positive pigs, but apparently healthy, so no clinical signs, still makes its way to the slaughterhouses. What are your thoughts? Because this is reality. What are your thoughts with regards to this? And what are your suggestions to mitigate this?
This is a question of surveillance and monitoring. Okay. So the two levels of the question is one is regarding tooth extraction and related to compartmentalization. It's highly possible. That's why you have a health assurance team that would monitor biosecurity within a compartment. No? Hindi ka naaasa sa gobyerno because your health assurance team will be doing the rounds, okay, implementing biosecurity. So they would be able to identify loopholes and ask you to plug the loopholes. Okay. Now, If, for example, one farm would break, this is where you put in, this is part of the biosecurity plan. The stop movement, quarantine, testing, disposal. No? So, yung sinasabi kanina responsible hog raising, parang responsible pet pet care yan eh, di ba? So pagka
Yes, yes.
mag-positive ka, pag nag-positive yan, anong gagawin mo? This is reality, ibebenta mo kaagad, di ba? So that is how it comes into the market, di ba? So but a responsible hog raiser, if we have a biosecurity plan already, ang mangyayari niyan, ano na, uh, there is already a procedure, di ba? Sabi nga ni Dr. Hong kanina, you should always practice how to move pigs in a safe way to prevent contamination of the environment. That will be part of the biosecurity plan. Okay, so what if there is an outbreak? What will you do? You should know it. But the best way really is to prevent. What is your suggestion to mitigate this? Surveillance, monitoring, implement proper biosecurity. At saka huwag kang manghihinayang. Napapansin natin kasi ayoko munang katayin yan kasi sayang eh. Hindi. Pag nakita mo talaga, pag nag-positive yan, diretso na. Because you are not saving one pig. Remember, you are trying to save the farm or the herd. So wag mo papakunahan yan. If there is a part that is diseased, di ba, sa surgery natin, what do? You incise and cut it away.
Debride.
And
Yeah,
save.
debride.
Hindi debride. Minsan cut it off, di ba? So remove
Amputate.
it. Amputate. To save the animal. So ganun din yun. But we're talking about a pet. But this one, we're talking about the herd. You want to save the herd, you want to save the business. So huwag mo sabing, sayang, hintayin muna natin kung mag-positive yan o negative. But remember, there's a procedure ni Dr. Hong where he was successful. They removed already the sick sows and placed it in a pen, right? But there are no pigs. Right? There might not be farms that will not have the vacant pens kasi lahat natin minamaximize natin yan eh. Pero sa kanila meron siyang ganon. So I don't know. So but definitely that is one way to do it. Surveillance and monitoring. That's the only way to do it.
Thank you, Doc Max, for the insight. We have another question here. Do we see hog dispersal projects in backyard farmers would really help in seeding our hog volume, or it would be better to support commercial farms with effective biosecurity control? This is a question by Dr. Dison. Do we see hog dispersal projects in backyard farms would really help in seeding our hog volume, or would it be better to support commercial farms with effective biosecurity control? Your thoughts, Doc Max?
Thank you, Dr. Lison. Maganda talagang question yan. It's a question, tatanggalan mo ba ng hanap buhay yung backyard farmer at suportahan mo lang yung commercial farm? Yun yung problema niyan. Although we realize that it will be very difficult to implement biosecurity in backyard farms. We realize that. No? That is why we are suggesting that we put them in clusters. So the question is the dispersal project really help in seeding our hog volume? Maybe if you're just, ito nga yung argument eh, if you're just going to go into grower, di ba? Ang immediate kasi is mas mabilis yung finisher herd eh. Kuha ka ng piglet, palakihin mo, tsak, may kita na kagad, di ba? At the end of 4 months, 5 months, whichever, di ba? But yung to raise the volume, hog population, you need to invest in breeders. Kasi yung finisher, nilipat mo lang yan from one farm to another. Di ba? But you did not increase population. The only way to increase population is really to raise breeder animals. Di ba? So, but a short-term way of doing it is really just to go for the finisher population. And then, ang susunod doon kasi may mga babae yan eh. Di ba? So, dun sa females na yun, well, from a genetic company, this is not really a good solution. But if you want to raise, you have working for a genetic company. But really, you can use those fins kasi di ba merong F2, F3 sa backyard, di ba? Because the alternative is zero. My philosophy is always the alternative is zero. Di ba? If we don't do anything, if we don't use these sows for as breeder animals, yung selection naman yan eh. Wala kang talo niyan. Wala kang talo niyan. Kasi pagka naman hindi nag-successful, bebenta mo. Bawi yung kita mo. But really, if you make them into breeders, ang solution diyan barako lang. Similya lang ng PIC. Bawi ako, Dr. Jack. Sa barako lang, ano lang yan, it's only the semen. Semen lang yan. So you produce, even if you have an F3, you use the right boar, you have the next generation will be a better uh, uh, guilt or sow. Diba? Because na-improve mo na eh. But what you have done is that you have added to the sow population. You did not transfer pigs from one to the other, which is the dispersal project sa backyard farms. But kasi ang problema niyan, kailangan din natin bigyan ng hanap buhay yung backyard farmers natin at kailangan natin silang tulungan. Yun yung BABay ASF eh. Yun yung Bantay ASF sa barangay na project ng PCSP. No? But at the same time, pagka lang naman kasi commercial farms ang binigyan natin, ng tinulungan natin, which is good kasi mas mabilis yan because they have the capital. Kaya nga the government is coming up with the helping the backyard, malaki yung kanilang pondo to help yung sa repopulation. But again, yeah, I agree that we should see the backyard farm. But at the same time, we should also invest in females, in gilts and sows. But then also we have to help them. We help them in terms of the proper genetic program to improve yung efficiency ng farm. I hope I answered your question, Dr. Disan.
Thank you, Doc Max, for your insight. You know what makes BABay ASF a noble endeavor, since against all odds, a lot of experts declared that in their experience, especially the European nation, they know that the backyard will become a reservoir, so they decided to not support or continue backyard production. In the Philippines, it's a novel trust since it is a source of livelihood. And what we're doing, or what Dr. Max is championing, is that we teach them how to do pig raising the responsible way and upgrade their biosecurity. All right, Dr. Max, there's a question here by, not a question, but rather an insight coming from Dr. Bungay. Are the compartmentalization guidelines properly implemented in the country? What are the major threats or challenges or drawbacks that you see in the? I assume Dr. Bungay is talking about the pilot project.
Thank you again, Dr. Bungay, for your very good questions. Medyo mahirap magtanong si Dr. Alice eh. Pumabawi yata sa akin eh. Joke lang, Dr. Alice, joke. But actually, kasi what we're implementing are actually OIE guidelines. No? We're not inventing new rules. Okay? So the guidelines that we are implementing in Batangas, that we will be implementing in Batangas, are culled from the OIE, but adapted to suit Philippine conditions. Pero kung ano yung nandun sa OIE, Biosecurity Guidelines, sa Terrestrial Manual, yun ang i-implement natin. No? What are the major threats or challenges or drawbacks? Yun nga yung number one, mahirap mag-implement ng biosecurity. That's why you need somebody from the outside to make sure that you are following strictly biosecurity procedures. At tapos, ang suggestion kasi namin dito, hindi ito libre. If you are a member of the cluster, of a compartment, you have to pay. Hindi naman malaking pera. But kasi, how are you going to, kasi the reality is, how will be the health assurance team be able to work if there is no budget? Di ba? So this is going to be a cooperative effort, no? Na kailangan, hindi pwedeng puro volunteer work eh. Hindi pwedeng volunteer work. So there you have to be contributing to the kitty or for the funds to be able to operate yung biosecurity plan. No? So yung talagang challenge talaga rito. Pag nagsosolo ka, Pilipino tayo eh, di ba? Pwede na yan. Okay na yan. Pero hindi. Kasi nung sa first, talagang ang biosecurity is a very hard master. Sabi nga, it's a very hard master. Kasi isang pagkakamali mo lang, pasok kagad dyan sa herd mo. Pasok kagad, puputok kagad yung whatever disease. We're not only talking about ASF, but other diseases as well. No? So you have to be very careful. So yun ang talagang drawback. Isa pang drawback niyan is yung source mo ng pigs. No? Kasi maraming nag-repopulate na nauna na eh. One cycle, okay sila. Second cycle, tinamaan sila. Bakit? Kasi malaki kita na sa first cycle, naghanap sila ng baboy. Nakakita sila ng mura. Anong nangyari? Meron palang dalang sakit. Diba? So kailangan din, yun isa sa mga gagawin ng health assurance is to make sure that the source of the pigs or piglets or whatever is free from ASF. At pagdating sa farm, kasi bumiyahe yan eh, dapat may kasama pa rin ang surveillance to make sure that they are really free. Diba? So may testing. So kasama yung surveillance. So yun po talaga yung mga major threats, Dr. Alice.
Max, for your answer. May rebuttal po si Doc Alice. Doc Max, you were part of my academic development. Ako ang isang product how you handled our class. Peace, sir. Truly thankful ako sa iyo. Okay, so
Thank you, Doc Alice. Biro lang naman yun sa akin. I really appreciate. I've seen your development hanggang sa nandun ka na sa UP Manila. It's really so yeah. I really appreciate what I really admire your hard work that you have done.
all right. Comment, Doc Max, from Dr. Rubina Crescencio. Doc Max, it will be very interesting to see the different protocols or guidelines that will be developed in the pilot area. Example is Batangas. All right. So we won't be holding you long, Doc Max. Thank you very much for your time. And take-home message probably from your presentation one is partnership and cooperation is very critical. At the same time, we can and we will stand up from this ASF problem. It will become a footnote in the history of pig racing. Thank you very much, Doc Max. And for the other questions that I wasn't able to secure, Doc Max will be gladly answering them given the opportunity. Thank you very much, Doc Max.
Thank you all. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you, Dr. Montenegro, for comprehensively responding to our attendees' questions. As a sign of gratitude, the PVMA would like to present the Certificate of Appreciation. The Philippine Veterinary Medical Association presents the Certificate of Appreciation to Dr. Maximino M. Montenegro for imparting his knowledge and insights as a speaker in the 89th PVMA Scientific Conference and Annual Convention, given this 15th day of February 2022 at Cristina Villas Mountain Resort in Antipolo City. Signed, Dr. Bernard B. Basic, Convention Chairman and PVMA Vice President and President-elect. Dr. Pag-asa B. Curaming, PVMA Secretary, and Dr. Paulino C. Abad, PVMA President. Thank you very much, Dr. Montenegro. Let's all work together towards mitigating ASF.